confirmation vote in question. An allegation of sex abuse rocks Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. The lifelong Catholic denies the claim. We have a report. Growing scandal. Pope Francis takes a decisive step in the clergy abuse investigation in Chile. We're at the Vatican. Fearsome forecast. At least 17 people are dead as Hurricane Florence pummels North Carolina. Why experts believe more damage is on the way. And a Pope's present. The Holy Father surprises pilgrims in St. Peter's Square. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, September 17th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Jason Calvey in for Lauren Ashburn. Judge Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation hits a major snag. A woman alleges Kavanaugh forced himself on her at a party when they were teens. Kavanaugh and his accusers say they're open to testifying to the Senate. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh defends himself today, saying, "This is a completely false allegation. I have never done anything like what the accuser describes to her or to anyone." Christine Blasey Ford says Kavanaugh physically and sexually assaulted her at a party more than 3 decades ago. She says she was around 15. He was around 17. Ford is a psychology professor at Palo Alto University in California. Ford wrote Senator Dianne Feinstein in July, but her attorney says Ford asked to be anonymous.
She went to her senator because she had information that she thought was very important that had bearing on the fitness and character of this nominee. And throughout that period of time, Senator Feinstein's office was eager for her to come forward if she felt comfortable coming forward.
So far, the Senate Judiciary Committee is still set to vote on Kavanaugh's nomination Thursday afternoon. But senators from both parties call on the committee to postpone the vote. Even if Kavanaugh makes it through the committee, he has to face the full Senate, with key Republicans still on the fence, including Susan Collins of Maine.
He was very emphatic in his denial.
Do you believe the accuser?
I don't know enough to make a judgment at this point.
The president tonight defends his Supreme Court pick. He also says the allegation against Judge Kavanaugh should have been brought up a long time ago. White House correspondent Mark Irons joins us. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Jason. The president says Democrats knew about the accusation against Brett Kavanaugh for months and shouldn't have waited until now to bring it up right before Thursday's planned vote on his nomination. The president acknowledging there could now be a delay in that vote, but he stands by Judge Kavanaugh.
He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody, never had even a little blemish on his record. The FBI has, I think, gone through a process 6 times with him over the years where he went to higher and higher positions. He is somebody very special. At the same time, we want to go through a process. We want to make sure everything is perfect, everything is just right.
The president did not give specifics, but he said the Senate should go through its process and hear everybody out. Earlier in the day, the president's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, said Christine Ford, the woman accusing Kavanaugh, should not be insulted or ignored, but she should testify under oath before Congress. We know the president himself has been accused of sexual misconduct by more than a dozen women. He denies those allegations. Also today, the president said he has not spoken to Judge Kavanaugh, but it is worth noting that Kavanaugh was at the White House today. A White House official tells me that is routine. It's not unusual for him to be here, and Kavanaugh has made many of these visits. Jason?
Okay, White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thanks, Mark. And let's talk with Carrie Severino of the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Your group has spent millions on Judge Kavanaugh. How damning are these allegations to your guy?
Well, I think when you look at them in the context of here's someone who has a decades-long career in public service, 6 different FBI background checks, not a hint of misconduct. Women from every phase of his life saying this is someone who's actually decent and upstanding with women. 65 women from high school who said they knew him at the time. This is out of character, doesn't make sense with the person they knew. And then just today, 2 more women who had dated him and said, no, this is not what she described is not anything like the Brett Kavanaugh I know. He was always very decent and respectful. So, and then of course his emphatic denial. A lot of this just doesn't add up, and particularly when you look at it with Senator Feinstein and her own way she treated the allegations. If she thought that they were credible or serious or relevant, Why did she not do anything for 6 weeks and just let them sit there? I think there's a lot of questions there. What I'm not questioning is what the politics, the Democrats, are trying to do with this, because you've seen people who've been calling for delays since before Kavanaugh was nominated. Of course, they want to use this now to create even more delay in the process.
But this accuser, a professor in California, says that she went through a polygraph test and did pass that polygraph test.
Yes, she does. Although there's a whole literature of how polygraph tests are interpreted is very challenging. It's also the situation is a party that everyone was drinking at. It's hard to know what happened. But what we're looking at is here allegations that have not been corroborated by Senator Feinstein, by the Washington Post, who also had this from a tip line to them since the beginning of July, all the way back. We have to be careful that, while, as Kellyanne Conway said, we have to be respectful of the woman and make sure we hear her out. But I think it also has to be done in a way that is fair to Judge Kavanaugh, so that there's no chance that an allegation that really has no basis is being allowed to derail someone who has a long career of public service and of behavior that even the ABA, when they analyzed him, they said on integrity, this is someone who gets an A++.
So shouldn't we then just delay the committee vote on Thursday, give everybody time to thoroughly vet this allegation?
Well, the challenge here is trying to give the opportunity for both sides to be heard while not letting this just be another tool for delay. As I said, they've been trying to delay from the very beginning with ever-shifting reasons. And honestly, most of the Democrats have already announced they're going to vote against him, and they would like to delay this until 2021. So that isn't the right route. That actually makes it further political. I think there has to be a way to efficiently have some kind of a hearing or an investigative process by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then move forward, so it's not just being used. I mean, they're treating this woman as a partisan tool just to delay a nomination. That's not the right debate we should be having.
But this woman made this allegation. I mean, don't you think that she has the right to be heard and to have this vetted fully in the open?
Absolutely. I think she's going to. I think that's something the White House and Senator Grassley have been very clear about. She will get the chance to be heard, and Judge Kavanaugh will get the chance to tell his side of the story, and to the extent he can refute these allegations. So that's going to happen. We have to do so in a way that the process is fair and is not just a political guilty until proven innocent, and also isn't used simply to create delay for the sake of delay. With an allegation this old and this vague, really, in many of its key points, it's going to be challenging to find any evidence that she can even corroborate. So, but I think you just have to be careful, because the timing of this is so clear that it was something was held onto, specifically dropped, and it leaked, not even done in the proper way, where you would give it, if there was information that the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee has, they shouldn't leak it then piece by piece through the media. You give it to the chair of the Judiciary Committee. You allow them to have their analysis. They have had behind closed doors ways they could have maintained the privacy and the sensitivity of the topic and her confidentiality. She chose not to do that, and instead to add to the circus we have seen surrounding this hearing. That's not fair to anyone involved in the process.
We'll see what happens with that, but thank you, Carrie Severino. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate that very much. The Diocese of Salt Lake City in Utah says 16 priests were credibly accused of sexual abuse. Now that dates to 1960, with one report from this year. Bishop Oscar Solis says most of the allegations came after the priests had left, retired, or died. And the Diocese of San Diego adds 8 priests to its list of those believed to have abused children. In 2007, the diocese settled nearly 150 claims of child sex abuse, those committed by 48 priests and 1 lay employee. Now to the Netherlands, where a report links half of Dutch bishops to abuse. 4 bishops are accused of committing abuse, another 16 blamed for transferring accused priests to new parishes. The study looks at the years from 1945 to 2010. It's based on a 2011 probe by the Church in the Netherlands. The Holy Father removes a Chilean priest from the priesthood. Father Christian Precht faces allegations he abused children and adults. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliet, who is Father Precht, and what do we know about his defrocking?
Jason, Christian Precht is the former head of a church-sponsored human rights group known for protesting against torture in the 1980s under ex-Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet. Now, Precht has since been accused of sexual abuse as part of an investigation into the Marist Brothers religious community. He has previously denied the abuse, and he hasn't been formally charged with any crimes by Chilean authorities. He'd been suspended from ministry for 5 years, from 2012 to 17, after the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith found him guilty of abusing both minors and adults. And this is the first removal, Jason, from priestly office by Pope Francis since every bishop in Chile offered to step down, as you'll remember, in May over Chile's sex abuse crisis.
Now, Pope Francis appeared to make reference to getting to the root of the abuse crisis around the world in remarks he made over the weekend. What exactly did he say?
The Holy Father went to the southern Italian island of Sicily to mark the 25th anniversary, Jason, of the murder of Blessed Pino Pugliese. He fought against the mafia, and in remarks to priests and religious, the Holy Father told them to fight their vices and strive to live a consistent witness of morality. He said people look to priests for simplicity, not for worldliness. Now, the Holy Father held up the example of Blessed Pino Pugliese and pointed out the murdered priest's room, saying that it stands in genuine simplicity. It is the eloquent sign of a life consecrated to the Lord, who doesn't seek consolations and glory from the world.
Now, Juliet, I want to switch gears now. The Vatican says tomorrow it will release a new set of rules on how the Synod of Bishops will be structured. What is the significance of this?
Jason, a press conference is being held tomorrow on these changes. The move comes just a couple of weeks before the Synod on Youth in Rome starts, and the new set of rules is in the form of a papal document called an apostolic constitution, which is one of the most formal decrees that a pope can issue. Now, it has great legal weight and represents, in this case, Francis's apparent desire to restructure the Synod of Bishops, or the gathering of bishops from around the world, as it's known. Now, we'll have to wait till tomorrow to see exactly what the details are. Until now, the Synod has been based on previous documents issued by Blessed Paul VI and Benedict XVI, and it's mainly been a purely advisory board, Jason.
We'll wait to see what you have to report tomorrow. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
A typhoon hits the Philippines and China. It kills at least 69 people. The storm also battered Hong Kong, pounding it with winds of 120 miles per hour. It's the most powerful cyclone to hit the territory since 1979. Typhoon Mangkhut caused a landslide in the northern Philippines, killing at least 11 miners and leaving dozens buried. Rescuers dug through mud and debris, covering a chapel where miners and their families had taken shelter. The mayor of ytsync-en says there is a high chance they were killed. Russian Orthodox leaders snubbed the head of the Orthodox Communion. The Russians say they will not join events led by the Istanbul-based Patriarch of Constantinople. The fight is over the church in Ukraine. Patriarch Bartholomew is in favor of allowing them to be free from Moscow. It's been under Russian oversight for centuries. The Russian Orthodox Church opposes the change. And a lot more on EWTN News Nightly coming up. How a Catholic parish in New York plays a role in the opening of the United Nations General Assembly. Plus, the latest on the deadly storm pounding the Carolinas. Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Jason Calvi, in for Lauren Ashburn. The Holy See's top representative at the United Nations calls on world leaders to respect the dignity of every human person, including migrants. It's one of the many issues Catholic leaders are praying for tonight ahead of the annual UN General Assembly. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby joins us from New York City, outside the very church where they're meeting. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Jason. Archbishop Bernardito Alza, the Holy See's ambassador, is welcoming high-ranking officials here to the Church of the Holy Family. The plight of migrants and refugees is one issue they're praying for, but also the lack of basic needs around the world, like clean water and medicine. Father Gerald Murray, the pastor, tells me these are fundamental issues for the church.
Crises should not, first of all, be looked at as simply political matters for solution, but humanitarian disasters that require aid. So the humanitarian efforts of the church, very vibrant, very well appreciated. They need to be highlighted because the church is giving a message through that, which is the children of God should love and respect each other, and the church is there to try to guarantee their rights when they're threatened.
Father Murray tells me it's vital the church encourages people of faith, Catholics and non-Catholics, to come together to pray for solutions to global challenges. Every year, his church hosts the ecumenical prayer service, as it is the closest Catholic church to the United Nations. Officially, the 73rd Annual General Assembly kicks off tomorrow, but many heads of state, including President Donald Trump, will be delivering their speeches next week. The General Assembly is the main deliberating and policy-making wing of the UN, in which all member states have equal representation. Jason?
Wyatt, I understand the United States and Russia are clashing over UN sanctions against North Korea. What's the latest on that?
Well, Jason, the U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley is accusing Russia of violating UN sanctions. Her and Russia's envoy traded accusations today during a Security Council meeting. Haley says the Russians are blocking the release of a report which supposedly shows they are transferring petroleum products to North Korea. Jason?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from New York City. Thanks, Wyatt. Hurricane Florence rocks North Carolina, killing at least 20 people. Emergency crews saved several others from the rising floodwaters. Nearly 3 feet of rain has fallen, leaving parts of Interstate 95 flooded. More than 500,000 homes and businesses are also without power. The storm now threatens at least 5 other states, including South Carolina.
Those rivers in North Carolina that have received heavy rainfall are coming our way, as are our own rivers, which are gathering water now from the ground in streams and tributaries and creeks, and they have not crested, they have not even begun yet, but they will.
The forecast calls for more rain. Already rising rivers are expected to become even more dangerous. Construction crews in San Francisco remove a 19th century statue of a saint. Some people called it racist. The sculpture, Early Days, shows a Native American at the feet of St. Junipero Serra and a Spanish cowboy. Activists said it was demeaning to Native people. The statue will be restored, then temporarily put in storage while a permanent home is found. Stay with us. Up next, a prayer service in Philadelphia begs forgiveness for clergy sexual abuse. Plus, why the Pope had a present for thousands of pilgrims. Glad to have you with us tonight. I'm Jason Calvi in for Lauren Ashburn. Church leaders in Philadelphia hold a prayer service asking forgiveness for the clergy abuse crisis.
Especially among those in positions of authority in the church. Lord, deliver us, we pray.
The liturgy took place Friday at the Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul. Some of the city's bishops and priests attended, as did religious sisters and lay Catholics. And in Rhode Island, Bishop Thomas Tobin Friday led a day of prayer and penance. He asked for God's forgiveness for the sins of the worldwide clergy sex abuse scandal. Bishop Tobin told the congregation he recognized the anger and confusion many Catholics feel. Americans head to the polls in less than 50 days. Democrats hope for big wins in the midterm elections, and Republicans are a little worried. Operatives in both parties say Republicans have the edge in holding on to the Senate, but GOP leaders worry about keeping control of the House. They point to a surge in enthusiasm among Democrats, plus some moderate voters really don't like the president. Let's talk about this with Bob Cusack, from editor-in-chief of The Hill. Bob, thanks for being with us again.
Hey, Jason.
Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely.
So Democrats are confident that they can win those 23 seats in the House to take control. How likely is that?
I think it's likely. It's not a sure thing. After 2016, nothing is a sure thing. But I think the chances are anywhere from 70 to 80% that the Democrats are going to win back the House. The Senate's a different story. The map is very Republican-friendly. Democrats have to defend many more seats. So I think the chances are Republicans hold on to their majority in the upper chamber.
So Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell last week said when the smoke clears, they will still have the majority in the Senate.
Yes.
One of the races that you're following now is Florida. You say that's a really important issue. Why Florida?
Well, I think it's a key race for both parties. Rick Scott has gotten more popular over the last year or so, President Trump wanted him in the race, but he's running his own type of campaign. This race is very close. Senator Bill Nelson hasn't had a competitive general election in quite some time. So Republicans think he's a little rusty and that they can steal this seat. Now, if Nelson loses, the Democrat loses, I think the chances of Democrats winning back the Senate are almost zero. They have to win this race, kind of run the table. There's got to be a big wave. Democrats can win the Senate. Mitch McConnell has acknowledged they could lose the majority, but it's unlikely.
Because you've got all of these red states that Donald Trump won. Democrats are defending those states this year. You've got 10 of them. So
that's right.
I mean, the odds are in Republicans' favor, so we'll just have to see what happens at the actual, when people go to the polls. Now, President Trump's name is not on the ballot this fall, but he's very much on voters' minds. How do you think he's going to influence voters one way or the other?
I think the good thing for Democrats, the good news for them, is that most people don't vote for policy. They vote on personality, whether that's for president or in the midterms. Now, the economy is doing quite well, stock market doing quite well. That you would think would inoculate the GOP and their majorities. But usually that's not what does it, especially when the economy's better, more people don't fret about the economy, so they're not thinking about it. They're thinking about other issues. And President Trump has been on the campaign trail talking not so much about the tax law, but about immigration. That gets the base out. So Trump is going to go to these red states that he won more in the Senate than in the House districts. He'll go to West Virginia. He's been there many times. He'll go to Missouri. He'll go to North Dakota. And he will make the case that the base we need more Republicans in the Senate, because that's big for nominations, especially Supreme Court nominations.
Right, so he'll be talking about judges, he'll be talking about the border, he'll be talking, depending on what state he's in, he'll talk about pro-life issues on the campaign trail. But the economy, I mean, that's always comes back to the economy. I mean, but it depends on where we are in the fall, I guess, with how the stock market's doing and things like that.
That's right, and certainly Democrats are saying, well, Obama had something to do with this economy, and Republicans say that's ridiculous. So, but I do think that the economy is the thing that Republicans need to talk about a lot, because as House Republicans, their message is better off. You're better off basically than you were 2 years ago. So stay Republican, keep the Republicans in control of the House and the Senate. But in the House, it's looking quite dicey right now.
So what is then the message that Democrats need to win these 10 seats, for example, in those states that President Trump won?
Well, I think Democrats have to. They've struggled with a message. They've changed their message a lot. Honestly, in presidential election years, you need a strong message. But in midterms, the message is not as important. So I think they need to say, we need to have a check on President Trump. But some of these candidates say, listen, if it's good for my state, whatever that state is, usually that red state, I'll agree with President Trump. But other times I will disagree with him and I'll vote against him. So they need to come across as reasonable and attract independent voters.
We'll see what happens. Thank you so much, Bob Cusack from The Hill. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. And finally tonight, Pope Francis surprises pilgrims with presents.
No, niente. Questo un regalo del Papa.
The Holy Father gave a cross to each of the 35,000 people. They gathered yesterday for the Angelus in St. Peter's Square. Friday was the Feast of the Holy Cross. Francis said the crucifix is a sign of God's love for us. And you can see the gift right here. The Pope joked that the present was free, and anyone who tried to charge for it was not being truthful. I'm Jason Calvi, and for the entire EWTN News Nightly team, thanks for watching tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.